So here we are. All the festivities are slowly but surely coming to an end, and now we're beginning to turn our minds towards the new year. And I think that before you step into the new year as a rider, as an equestrian, it's often worthwhile having a look over what happened the previous year. Even if you think there is no value in it at all, I bet you will pick up a couple of little nuggets of information that are going to help you to begin to set out into this new year on the right foot, the right hoof, you and your horse. Okay, let's jump in. Hey there, and welcome to the Daily Strides podcast. My name is Lorna Leeson. I'm an equestrian trainer and coach, and I work with riders both online and in person, helping them to kind of plan out things a bit better, especially if they're left to their own devices and they're working without their own personal trainer or coach. Okay, so it's a new year soon, okay? We're in the last week of this year, and I don't know about you, but I've spoken with so many riders, and it seems like it's a bit of an up and down year for a lot of people, and I'm not quite sure why, because all of the craziness of the kind of years that have gone before has kind of for the most part died down, and things have returned to somewhat normal again. But for whatever reason, a lot of riders, maybe it was that whole bit in the middle, the final few years that like leading up to this one, that caused things to be a little bit out of whack. But whatever the reason, I think that as a rider, you could actually sit down now and begin to kind of mine what was going on this year to help you to set up the year that's coming. Now, I have been guilty myself in the past of skipping the whole review process, kind of thinking like, oh, it's fine. And I think for me, the reason is because, well, the planning process is just so much more kind of entertaining and exciting, isn't it? You're kind of sitting there and you're like, oh, I'm going to do this and I want to do that and it's going to be amazing, okay? But I do think that in order to really get the year off on a good note, if you can begin to identify patterns, okay, and what's going on with you and your horse and your riding, I think that that is going to help you to begin to kind of figure out what needs to be added, what needs to be created, what needs to be removed, what needs to be changed, whatever, okay? And I do think that the best way to do this actually is to begin going through the previous year. And of course, you can do this at any point. All you have to do is, start from today, okay? And see this has been the start of your new year if you're listening to this, let's say 3, 6, 9 months from now, okay? But I do think that it is nice to look through the previous 12 months and go through it month by month, okay? And you can then begin to identify what actually works for you and your horse and your riding and what doesn't. Now, my first kind of suggestion for you to do this would be to whip out your phone and to actually go through your photo app. And I'm going to suggest doing this in a place where like you're feeling comfortable. Maybe you've poured yourself a nice drink or made a nice cup of tea, whatever it is. And you've got a little bit of time in your hands. You're not going to be interrupted by everybody. And you can just actually, with a pen and paper, start going through the year of the photos, okay, on your phone. And luckily for us, we have our phones now. And usually we're fairly good at taking photos of random things. And what I found, because I must say, when I'm in the arena, I have a habit of not whipping out the phone. I've just struggled to look at things, I suppose, in the right perspective when I'm looking through the phone. I don't know why, okay? I have this whole thing about it, okay? And I really am on the struggle bus. So I tend to actually look through, like a lot of my photos would not be actually work or training related photos, okay? But what I do know is that by going through the photos through the year, different things that, first of all, I've totally forgotten even happened. And it's like, oh yeah, remember that, okay? But what they do is they trigger different memories to do with riding and to do with training, okay? So if you maybe are like me and you're like, no, I never take a photo of me and my horse, that's fine. I would still suggest doing this because, as I said, those photos of other things that are important in your life can very often it's like they're linked to then the riding. And, what I find myself is, oh, I remember that day when that happened to whatever. And it was like, oh, I couldn't get to work with the horse that day, or I had to do like this really quick session with the horse that day because, and you then can begin to build out your actual, I suppose, equestrian year, okay? And all the memories from the equestrian side of things for your year as well, okay? So I think that's important. And I also suggest, and this is what I usually do, is I will write down as well the non-horse related things, but the things that had like a big impact. And whether it was like really exciting and it was fantastic stuff, or whether it was like, oh, that was a bit of a bummer, or whatever the situation is, I'll write it all down, because I find that very often there are like certain times of the year, and after you've done this for a few years in a row, you'll begin to see patterns within the actual yearly review itself as well. But you'll find there's maybe certain times of the years when things don't go to plan, okay? Or there's always something cropping up or whatever. And I think that also helps you to better begin to be realistic with the plan that you want to create for you and your horse, okay? Okay, so from there, I would then suggest beginning to ask yourself questions. Now, I personally think that if you can approach your riding and then your horse's training as two separate kind of subjects, okay, I think that may be the most beneficial and the most helpful for this. But I think also it's important to look at this from a couple of different aspects. So the first one would be obviously kind of skills and development and training, okay? So both you, and remember I said you and then your horse, okay? So like, what was new? What did you learn new? What did you work on during the year? What needed more work? You could think about how did things progress? Is there a movement that maybe at the beginning of the year was not all that great, and now you're finding, oh, that's kind of something that does not take all that much effort anymore, and we're fairly successful at it, okay? You could also think back to the training goals that you set for yourself and your horse at the beginning of the year. I know so many riders, they'll set these goals and then they forget about it. And then maybe 3 years later, they'll look back, they're like, oh yeah, remember I said that. And meanwhile, like obviously nothing has ever happened with it. But I do think that it's important that if you're going to set the training goal, you need to review it. Like, this is all about reviewing, and reviews are important, okay? They help keep us on track. They help us kind of identify when we maybe are on a bit of a detour, when we're heading down the wrong path, okay? But then you could also think about maybe adjustments that you could potentially make in the plan, whether it's for yourself again or your horse, and kind of separating them, that could maybe help you to level up a little bit. Could be maybe riding a different horse, or riding more, or maybe doing some kind of like a cross training type of thing to increase maybe your fitness, your suppleness, your stamina, whatever, okay? And then your horse as well, like what could be done differently? What could you introduce? What could you stop doing? What does your horse need to help him as well? The second thing that I would suggest, kind of the second, if you want, approach or perspective that you could begin to look at this, would be your whole partnership with your horse and the level of communication that you have together, okay? I think it's important to continuously want to develop the relationship, the partnership that you and your horse have. I think that's a very important thing. And I think it's something that maybe many riders don't quantify, if you want, okay? They're just like, yeah, no, it's the same. No, we're great. But if you actually worked on that and made that a goal, you could see how, well, yeah, that might be a little bit more eye-opening, okay? And I suppose it forces you, if now it's something that you've said you want to do and it's something you actively are trying to improve, it almost forces you to begin thinking outside the box with regards to exercises and methods that you could use to make that happen, okay? You could talk about, is there any improvements in the partnership, or what challenges there are? Maybe it's down to your horse's behaviors. There's some sort of a behavioral issue going on that needs to be addressed. Whatever it is, okay? You start kind of working through these things. And then what could you do, as I said, to begin to strengthen that connection with your horse in the upcoming year? And again, very often that simple question can, I don't want to use the word force, but yeah, it's like force. It gets you to begin thinking a little bit differently about the approach. Like if you're just going to do the same thing next year that you done last year, where you're going to end up in the same boat, okay? So if you can begin to find something different, and it could be completely different, like this could be something you've never tried before. And doesn't that sound exciting? And also a little bit like, ooh, Ooh, a little bit nerve-wracking, but maybe that's what you and your horse need, because then if the two of you are going into something different together, in my experience, it helps you both to begin to bond a little bit more. And of course, you do have to have that initial bond there to begin with in order for that to really work for you. But yeah, I think it's always a good kind of a filter to come at that with. And then the final thing, which I think many of us don't actually consider when we're doing a review at all, would be equipment and facilities and even time. Okay, like time's a big one. When I'm talking about reviews, monthly reviews and that with riding, I'm always talking about time. But I do think equipment and facilities are really important. Like, was there any logistical challenges that you and your horse had? And whether it was your transport, his transport, or their transport, maybe it was the boarding, whatever, okay? Maybe there has been improvements to the facilities. If so, has it impacted your riding, your training, your relationship with your horse? Or maybe it has impacted it, but it's a little bit negatively, okay? But these are all important things that you can begin to question. Like, is the current setup that you and your horse have, is it actually helping the two of you? Is it working for you? Or is it maybe a little bit hindering and working against you guys when you're trying to train and work together? So I do think that it is important to consider that as well. And then my final piece of advice with this whole review is to actually whip out the riding journal. Now, if you have a riding journal to whip out, well, this would be a great time to get it out. If you don't, this is an even better time to start creating one. You don't need anything fancy, blank notepad, and just begin to track riding, track what you want, track your goals, hey? Like maybe write them down and see like, oh, look, this is what I'm working for. This is what we want to happen. And then you can regularly, every time you're with your horse and you're writing in your journal, you can regularly say, okay, so like today, the work that we maybe achieved today, is that working us closer to the goal, or is it taking us a little bit away from the goal? Very often just that simple question can help you to course correct, okay? So I think it's really, really important. You want to record like the riding, the training sessions, what exercises you worked on, what you struggled with, what the wins were, the successes, okay? All of these things can help you to, first of all, tweak things a little bit more for you and your horse. But not only that, again, the word that I used at the very beginning, patterns. You can begin to identify patterns. And it's these patterns, when you can identify them, when you can see them in black and white laid out in front of you, that is where you can begin to then make tweaks in order to either maximize on them or minimize them, okay? Whatever way the pattern's going. So once you have then that kind of clear 12 months laid out in front of you, this is where you can then use all of this information to help you to begin to actually plan for the next 12 months. And I want to chat more about that tomorrow. So I'd love if you can make a couple of hours today at some point to sit down, get a review done. It doesn't have to take very long. Make it as enjoyable as you want. Make a whole ritual out of it, okay? Make it be something special that you look forward to, that you're thinking, yes, I can totally do that. Again, you can just get a pen and paper, but I'm going to strongly suggest having a writing journal. It does not have to be fancy. It can just be a notepad, okay? Like a copybook, as we call it in Ireland, okay? So a copybook and a pen, that's all you need. And you can begin to write all these things down, and you can really and truly begin to then use this information to go forward with the planning of the next year. And that's what I'll be back here chatting about tomorrow. Okay, I do hope that this was really helpful. I would love for you to pop over to stridesforsuccess.com/DSP, because right now, and I've extended this to the end of the year, so you've still a couple of days, there is a buy one and bring a friend on for free special going on for Daily Strides Premium. So you can have a whole year of audio horse riding lessons delivered straight to your phone. You'll have a friend to work with as well, and you get, of course, all of the stuff that's going to be going on throughout the year. And we have so many plans for you, but all of those things are going on as well. So you can find all the info for that over at stridesforsuccess.com/DSP. And yeah, I will see you back here tomorrow, and we will begin planning out your year. I'm so excited for it. Okay, be good. Bye.